Hello my lovelies. So today I'm going to be talking about how to live a vintage lifestyle without a load of money or time. And I'm also going to be formally introducing myself on this app, as this is my first official YouTube video, but you can go and follow me over on Instagram and TikTok if you want to. And I'm just really excited to talk about where it all started for me and formally introduce myself. So yeah, let's get into it. So how did I become the 1940s girl? So when I was growing up, my mum was a single parent. My mum is a single parent. And growing up, we bought a lot of our furniture from charity shops to try and save a little bit of money. And as you can probably guess, a lot of the furniture that we would find would be from elderly people who had either moved away to a care home or sadly died. And the period kind of span... I also own a pigeon, but we'll get to that in another video. And for those of you who already know Penny, here she is. But yeah, so those eras kind of spanned from the Victorian era all the way up to the 1950s. And that was kind of what my homes were decorated in. So a lot of our furniture was antique or vintage. And yes, there is a difference between the two. And my mum would also buy me secondhand clothes and toys. And so charity shops were a huge part of growing up for me. I also had my grandpa, who was genuinely my best friend, is my best friend, but sadly he's no longer with us. And we would watch wartime films from the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, and yes, they were all based around World War II. The Dirty Dozen, The Guns of Navarone, Bridge over the River Kwai, The Great Escape. So very early on, I was watching World War II on the screen with my grandpa, who was only a child during World War II, but would still tell me fascinating stories. And then at school, I went to Eden Camp. And then in college, I did a project on Glen Miller at this old manor house that's local to me. And then I did a project for a friend who was studying to be a photographer, and her mum was a hairdresser, and she wanted to do 1940s inspired hairstyles. So I was posing as a lady holding a Mrs. Beaton's cookbook and writing a love letter to a soldier overseas. And the era just kind of kept following me around. I also had my nan, who would talk to me a lot about fashion, how to present yourself to the world. So with the furniture and my grandpa and all the little projects I ended up doing and my nan, I kind of became really in tune with that era. But things really started to kick off when me and my mum bought our first house together. Apologies if I'm talking really fast. I'm not used to having all of this time on social media. I keep forgetting that this video can be as long as I want it to be. So yeah, apologies if I'm rambling. I'll try and slow down. So up until this point, me and my mum had rented, and I tell you, that was an ordeal. For anyone out there who rents, you have all my respect, because we did not have a good experience, and we had to move out of a lot of homes while I was growing up. I've moved 10 times, by the way, 10 times in my lifetime, because of loads of different reasons, like landlords turfing us out just because they could. Damp became a huge thing, rent prices dramatically increasing. It was just not the one. And I decided that I was done with it. I was done with renting. I was fed up. We'd had a really difficult couple of years. I'd lost my grandpa suddenly as well, and that absolutely broke me beyond words. My mum got cancer, which was horrendous news. She's in remission, by the way. Yay, my mum. A relationship that I was in had broken down. I was working 3 jobs whilst at university, and at one point me and my mum were genuinely homeless. So I was done, and I was willing to do whatever it took to try and get on the property ladder. So we had a very small deposit, exceptionally small, and we were looking at a price point that was very low, especially by today's standards. But I was still determined to find the right house. And we saw some dire properties. Like it was depressing to be met with the realism of your price point. I mean, one time an estate agent tried to advertise a house by going, and there's also a tree. There's also a tree. That was the only good thing she could say about this house, was that there was a tree in the garden. It wasn't even a big tree. It wasn't even a very good tree. It was just a tree. And that was the selling point of that property. Another time we came up to a house, and the next door neighbour's front garden was such a sight to behold that we didn't even bother going to the viewing. So yeah, we've been through it. We've really been through it. And when we found this house, it was a shining light. We happened to know the lady that was selling it because she went to our church. So she'd known my grandparents forever, and she'd known me growing up. And we didn't even realise that it was her house until we walked in for an appointment. And the estate agent was late. And Rosa, the lady that owned this house, was in her 90s and had people doing the viewing regardless of the estate agent not being there yet, and just walking through her home. And Rosa couldn't even really mobilise to get up the stairs, and here were these people just wandering around. Me and my mum were fuming for her. We were so angry. And when the estate agent finally arrived, you know, we did say,
do you realise that there are people just traipsing around upstairs and you're not even here to support Rosa?
So anyway, we were mad. And when Rosa realised that we wanted the house, she was thrilled, because she'd lived in this house only for about 15 to 20 years. But she'd lived here with her husband, and she really wanted it to go to a family. And we didn't think we'd be able to afford it. We couldn't really afford the price that it was at. So we offered what we could comfortably. And I remember I used to work at a hotel at the time, and I emailed the offer, and about, I think it was only about half an hour later, I get a call from the estate agent to say that the offer's been accepted. From that point on, our lives changed forever. And me and my mum, we were picky. So we had a few things that we were looking for in a home. It had to be old. We needed it to be old. We needed it to have character. Anything from you know, the late 30s downwards, perfect era for us in a home. Number two, I want some original features. We needed some of the original features to be there, even if they needed uncovering, even if it was a fixer-upper job. We just wanted a house with potential, and we found all of the above when we moved here. And this is what I mean when I say that you don't need a lot of money or time to live your version of a dream home. I'll tell you what you need. You need dedication, you need a vision, and you need passion. Me and my mum refurbished this entire house on a budget whilst working full-time jobs, and literally almost everything in this house is secondhand. I mean, we started to coin the term of the 1940s house because of a cooker that we got on eBay for £16 that is said to be from around 1946 to 1948, which is also, interestingly, currently in a museum in Rainhill in Liverpool, I think. It's about resourcefulness, and it's about a make, do and mend attitude. I promise you, you do not need a spare 200 grand. You do not need to just stumble across an abandoned log cabin in the middle of rolling countryside just begging to be refurbished. Anywhere can be beautiful with the right attitude and dedication. I mean, I live in the city, and not many people think that I do, or that this house is in the middle of urban city living, but it is. And it's the same with fashion. You don't need big brands behind you. You need eBay, Spock, Vinted, and charity shops. Not only because wandering into a charity shop, not knowing what you're going to find, is an utter delight, and I love the hunt, but because it promotes sustainable fashion, which I think the environment could do with right now. Honestly, you will find no more of an eclectic collection as wandering into your local charity shops. Just give it a try. Most of what I wear is from charity shops. I mean, I have a few pieces from replica companies online who replicate certain eras, but everything else that you see me in is from a charity shop. And I love it. I boast about it. It gives me so much pride to say that I found something in a charity shop. And I do think that that is becoming a lot more accepted these days, secondhand fashion, especially with the growth of retro and vintage aesthetics. You don't need to be ashamed anymore of shopping in charity shops. Not like when I was at school and I got bullied for being poor because I had poor person's shoes. Nowadays it's celebrated, and I'm all for that. So after we started refurbishments, I started documenting the whole thing on TikTok, and as it started to blow up, that's when we became referred to as the 1940s house, which is kind of funny because we are not period accurate in this home. We're not historians, we're enthusiasts. So you'll find pieces from all kinds of different eras in this home, and not just the 1940s. There's a 50s cabinet in the bathroom, there's a 70s blender in the kitchen, we have a log burner, which isn't strictly 40s at all, and our paintings span loads of different decades. And yes, I own a TV. The point is, we are passionate about our home and never claim to be something that we're not. And we built this from the ground up without any handouts, and we're living proof that you can too. Whether you're in an urban city or a rolling countryside landscape, whether you work full time, have children, whether you've got money to spare or you're living in your overdraft, your home can and should be your own space. And so, to recap, number one, have a vision. Keep a clear image in your mind of what you want your home to look like, smell like, feel like. What's the vibe? Number two, if your vibe is vintage or retro, then you better start spending your Saturday afternoons at charity shops. I promise you, you'll thank me later. Number three, be willing to put the work in. This is not going to be something that comes easy to you, potentially. It's a lot of DIY, and it's doing things on a budget, and it's doing things for the first time. So it's frustrating and it's time consuming. Which brings me on to number four, be patient. We're all living very busy lives, and your vision is not going to come true overnight, but it will be worth it. I promise you that. And number five, show it off. Vlog it, journal it, photograph it. This is your little slice of heaven, baby. Self-made heaven.